number of people during the past 4 doksans and also in other sesshin at times have brought up the very problem of the relationship between what is called student and teacher. As some people see it, there is something there which is a barrier. And they're quite sure it does not have really to do with the person of the teacher. It has to do with this relationship. Not with a relationship really, but with the idea of this relationship. With the idea of a teacher. And the idea of oneself as a student. There's something deeply carved into the mind about relationship with people who are bigger, older, in a what one considers higher, quote and unquote, position than oneself, parents, teachers, bosses. And one has formed a pattern of thinking and behaving toward them. Parents always know, so do teachers. They have to represent this to the child. I'm not trying to make a generalization. There are parents who are trying to work things differently, so are teachers. But in general, this wouldn't come up so frequently if there wasn't a deeply carved pattern in the mind of this student-teacher, teacher-student relationship, which in this way is no relationship at all. It's ideas. Particularly where the teacher goes, as it did with a parent, this feeling that one must do the right thing. One must show progress, success, because this way one is approved of, acknowledged, and one finds one's own position through the acknowledgement of the teacher. And unfortunately, a lot of these spiritual systems hook into this already existing pattern. You can try to dismantle the outer forms, and yet the pattern still remains because it's carried inside in images that are projected onto this person there. Some people tell me I have the same ambivalence toward you as I had toward my mother. Would it help you to tell you that I never see any of you as my son or daughter? It wouldn't occur to me. It wouldn't occur to me. Sometimes in figuring out when I hear how old you are and then in figuring out how old I am, yeah, makes sense, you could be. But how absurd. You're not. Why should I think in those terms? I just don't. Neither do I think of you as coming in as students or as myself sitting there as a teacher. I don't. But my protesting this and trying to affirm it or emphatically asserting it doesn't help you. Or does it? You yourself must drop that. How can you drop it? It may be an incredible relief to drop that. If you've dropped that, maybe you've dropped the whole thing of image making. And you may find for the first time what a relationship really is. this person who happens to sit in a certain place in a Doksan room cannot give you anything because there's nothing to give. Things can be pointed out by someone who sees clearly. And then it's for you to see clearly yourself. And then it's not a matter of what I've seen. It's not mine. It's not my vision. It's not a matter of vision. It's for everyone to see. Clarity of seeing is the capability of human beings, unless they need to delude themselves. And it's quite clear that we have a strong need for doing that, for creating illusions, because we love to live in illusions. One enters into a relationship with a teacher and there's a great urgency to make a thing, something out of this person. Rather than looking into this urgency to do that, the need to do that. Why? Because something rubs off on me if I have this teacher, and something isn't there for me because I'm associated, identified with this teacher. Why do I need that? Because I feel so utterly insignificant otherwise? Let me face this feeling of insignificance directly, nakedly, honestly, rather than looking for hooking onto significant things. Who am I when I'm not hooked on to anything? Can I face the fear of that, the scariness of standing alone, of facing anguish, pain, alone? And yet in some unspeakable way, not alone, because all of us face that. Anguish, fear, loneliness, pain, sorrow. And this groping for pleasure, hoping for good times and enjoying good times, we share that. How are we different in that? The fear and anguish in one person is the fear and anguish in all the rest of the people. Maybe a little bit differently shaded due to individual differences in history, upbringing. But fundamentally, fear is fear and anguish is anguish and needs to be faced. Or else we do all kinds of things just to run away from it, just to cover it over or drown it out, and it will not be covered over forever or drowned out. It must be faced as it comes up, as it is there. So can one be in touch with it? The teacher will, or this person will point this out and do this with you ad infinitum. No matter how often it happens, you come up and will do it. Are you doing it as much as this person is doing it? And when it comes up when you sit alone, let us continue some more. With readings from Bankei. Since I forgot to say it yesterday, these collections are taken from various issues of the Eastern Buddhist. Over the years, someone put this together for me into some kind of a volume. And the translation was done by Norman Waddell. The last thing we read was, "From that point on, my condition steadily improved, and here I am today, still living on. I was able to fulfill my vow after all, and was also able to bring my mother to an understanding of the unborn." The unborn was the word that Bankei used to describe what cannot put into words. And yet, for the sake of communicating with one another, words have to be used. Can one be very much aware of the limitation of words? Becoming aware at the same time how strongly a word, just the word, affects one. Arouses all kinds of emotions, of enthusiasm, inspiration, or antagonism. At the moment of such arousal, can one check back? The arousal is already sort of a blinker light of, watch out. What aroused this? It was a bunch of words, most of the time. What does the word stand for? It stands for a whole human being or for a whole situation. Let me rather be in touch with that human being in a situation and rather the word alone. The word is just a pointer toward that. So in listening, one must be open and expansive and embracing of that which the word stands for. Or else, people and groups of people just become abstractions. And we battle abstractions like Don Quixote battled windmills. In full armor, he battled windmills. So the unborn for Bankei stands for that which is there before thoughts arise. Thoughts come and go. And there's this something which is unaffected by that. Which is not in the realm of this limited consciousness of ours, which is all our past impressions, upbringings, moldings, fears, experiences, hopes, what we've learned, our skills, our aspirations, ambitions, the whole scenario of our future as we see it, as we want it to happen, or as we're afraid it may happen. Doomsday, that's also part of consciousness. California sinking into the ocean may or may not happen, who knows? Something completely different may happen. But once we think about it, it becomes an arouser, a trigger of emotions and feelings, and an opportunity for endless discussion. So, is that all we are? Of course, not mentioned yet were all these images of ourselves, this me, which is really in the center of this whole consciousness. Me, my past, my future, my history, my country. All the images of oneself. It's this seemingly so solid center of our awareness, our consciousness. And this unborn, there's none of that. What is it? Unborn and undying. As Bankei said at the time, suddenly I realized that until now I'd been unable to understand that all things were taken care of in the unborn. In one's everyday life, one is so incredibly beset by problems. They at times seem so insoluble. Public relations, relations within groups of people, staff, what have you. And yet everything is taken care of. Not by a Father God or Father Buddha or Mother Kanon sitting over this and taking care of the human beings. It's none of that. As much as we want to believe that, put our refuge and hope in that. It's taken care of because in this unborn there's clarity. Things are clear. Confusion is clear. Facts are seen clearly, and one can respond appropriately. Maybe not to the liking of everyone. But then is the dislike a hurt? That somebody dislikes something? Is that to be taken personal? No, this person dislikes something. Can that be seen clearly? And related to, not from a personal point of view. I wish you'd like me, then I would feel better. What a burden to put upon another person. Can we see how we want people to act so that we can feel better, rather than dealing or looking at our own dissatisfaction or whatever it is, or this bottomless craving for being appreciated and loved. A person who has this bottomless craving for being loved, in that person there is no love. Because when there's love, there's no need to be loved. There's just love. It's there. It spreads, it goes out, to use words. And it doesn't ask for returns. When returns don't come, when a person doesn't see it, or doesn't understand it, or doesn't feel it, then let us see it. One doesn't blame the person. Why don't you appreciate what I'm doing for you? That's an accusation, not an understanding. If we really want to find out about human beings and ourselves, we must look. With a real need, a yearning to understand. Not a desire to accuse or find fault, but a yearning to understand. From that time up, Bankei continues, until the present day I have encountered no one anywhere who could disprove my teaching. When I was traveling around from place to place, struggling with my problem, if I only had encountered someone who really understood things with whom I could have spoken, I would have not had to exert all that useless effort. But there was no such person, and I engaged in prolonged and laborious austerities, subjecting my body to hardships so cruel that I still suffer from the effects even now. That is the reason I'm unable to come here and meet with you as much as I would like. It's the only time Bankei mentions that he had some ill effects from all this, which in his youth and stamina and disposition he was able to take without dying from it. And yet he did it. He did it. That stands for itself. Nobody told him to. Nobody pressed him into a system and said, this is what you have to do. He did it by himself, for himself. Sometimes people have this incredible yearning for money, for possessions. To say, well, all possessions are transitory. Or things like this doesn't help this person at all. This person maybe needs to accumulate it all and find out for himself that some deep inner hollowness and emptiness cannot be filled by bank accounts or possessions. A lot of old people, I just read it the other day, one wealthy man had everything set up in Florida. Beautiful estate. And 9 days after retirement, he died. So, almost everything we have to find out for ourselves, and yet can't necessarily say you have to take heroin in order to find out how a heroin addict feels. You can see it. Or take drugs just in order to know how it feels. Our son used to say, Mom, you ought to take some of this stuff so you really understand more about life. His life was quite clear and that of his friends huddled in that room there. Difficulty of getting up in the morning. Around 6 o'clock in the evening one could maybe start getting up when the sun was almost down. You don't have to take it all. You can observe, but is there compassion in the observation? Or just fault finding and criticism and anger, resentment? Sometimes one thinks it has to be there, but it doesn't have to be there. It is there most of the time, but it doesn't need to be. In this awareness, it can be washed away. Like this river washes away at the ice. In a few weeks, there will be no ice left. Only we'll have some new one. Well, then, Bankei continues, after I realized that all things were well managed in the unborn, I wanted to talk to someone about it. As I was contemplating who I should go to, my master told me of a priest named Gudo in Mino province. He said that Gudo was an excellent teacher and suggested to go and talk with him, since he would be able to give me verification. Following this advice, I went to Mino, but at that time Gudo was away in Edo, so I was unable to meet and talk with him. Still, I thought that having already come this far, rather than return with nothing whatever to show up for my trip, I would visit some other priests in that area. I gained an audience with one of them. When I told him that I was a Zen monk from Banshu province and that I had come in order to receive his instruction, He proceeded to give me a short talk. After he had finished, I said, I realize I'm speaking out of turn, but I would like to say something. I know it usually isn't done these days. Please forgive my lack of decorum. I'm deeply grateful for all the teaching I've received from Buddhist teachers. It is not at all that I don't agree with what they say, only, somehow or other, the feeling I get is one of scratching an itchy foot without taking off my shoe. Have you ever done it? Kind of frustrating. Sometimes you're not in a place where you can easily take off the shoe, because that again is lack of decorum. They don't get directly to the itch. Their teaching does not strike home to my inmost being. Now please mind you, he is talking about certain people he talked to. This is not read here to incriminate any Buddhist teachers. Apparently met only like his Confucian teacher, those who understood from reading and didn't have a direct understanding themselves. Now here comes an interesting paragraph. Bankei says, as he was a priest, my words did not disconcert him in the least. Meaning, he didn't take as personal insult what was mentioned quite factually, which is a great thing for a person to be able to do that. Not immediately attack or defend or throw him out. He answered, yes, of course, just as you say. We merely teach others in the same manner we've been taught ourselves, following the teachings of the patriarchs which are found written in the sutras and the Zen sayings. It is shameful. It is not teaching based on enlightenment. Since we're not really enlightened, you're fully justified in saying that our teaching does not strike home to you, that it is like scratching an itch through a shoe. You recognized me easily for what I am. You are no ordinary man. There's no ordinary priest either. I've read, and Roshi has often said that in Japan, for someone to take over a temple, it's 3 years training, period. You go 3 years to a temple. And after 3 years, you sort of do something like what we call graduating, maybe. And you take over your father's temple. And then people who have images of Zen priests come to you to receive wisdom, or whatever. And it's up to the person to be honest, to have integrity. Under these circumstances, it was of course not possible for me to get verification from him. I returned home and shut myself up in a retreat. You see, Bankei didn't wallow in this experience and just try to bring it back up in the memory and just, live in that movie the whole time. He went on, he moved on. As I was engaged in contemplating the ways of my contemporaries and thinking over the means of bringing others to enlightenment, I heard that a Zen master named Dosha had come over from China and was now in Nagasaki. At my master's bidding, I went to see him. From Dosha, I finally received confirmation that I was beyond birth and death. That what he's understood was the real thing. And the understanding must have been right then, in the testing. Not that he said, this is what I experienced several weeks ago. Then one lives off of memory. Do you see it right now? That's important. Not talk about the richness of the experience of the past. I'll skip a paragraph here and go on. Your parents endowed each of you with a Buddha mind when you were born. There's a sort of an elaborate way of putting it. Oh, he puts it that way. Are we endowed with something? Christians believe we're endowed with a soul. Hindus believe we're endowed with Atman, which transmigrates till final merging with Brahman. And we may talk endlessly about having this Buddha nature. It's always very dangerous because one does so easily take comfort in words and inspirational words. We crave inspiration through words. People come home Sundays and say it was the most inspiring sermon. And then one goes about one's daily business in just the same way. But for the Sunday, it was inspiring. Do we need inspiration or do we need clear seeing? Clear seeing of this need for inspiration, for a high. This Buddha mind, which he here calls Buddha mind, and other times he calls it the unborn. Buddha, incidentally, means awaken, awake. I believe when we were in Poland, I was told that in the Polish language there's this word bud, and it means to awaken. Word may conjure up wanting to be like the Buddha, and having been told that I can become like the Buddha, so I'm aspiring toward that and not looking at what in me wants to aspire. The emptiness inside, that needs to be faced. And if that is seen clearly, the clear seeing is the Buddha mind. The Buddha mind is unborn and is invariably possessed of illuminating wisdom. This seeing and acting as being one. Seeing and also seeing what needs to be done and doing it, or not doing it. Saying something or not saying something. Not saying can be just as appropriate an action, or not doing can be just an appropriate action as doing or saying. It depends. Depends on the situation. And how clearly we perceive it. Not with me in there, wanting this or that out of it, bringing past experiences to bear on it. I see it with sort of tunnel vision of what I want to get out of it, or what I know was true for me in the past. Our past experience itself can become a very dominating authority. We may fight and shun and try to get away from all external authority. But my past experience, that tells me what to do, becomes my new authority. What am I? What is action when there is no referring to what I did in the past? Because the situation has changed. It's a fact. There's never the same situation coming up. Never, ever. It's impossible. So the past experience must, to some degree, be inappropriate. To some, maybe it's just slight degree, but can that be seen? And so one responds newly I'm not talking about when you build houses or in all the technical areas and skills. You need your past experience. But in relating with people and dealing with human problems, you need to see freshly. And if I can't see freshly, why can't I? I must get to the bottom of it, or else I'll do one nonsense after another. Bankei continues, since it was never born, there is no need to say that it is never perishing. Everlasting. There's no need to say that something was never born. You don't have to say it's everlasting. You just, time concepts are of the thinking mind. It's the thinking mind which creates the past and the present and the future. When there's no thinking in those terms, then there's just flow. Undivided flow. Which doesn't mean the sun doesn't set at a certain time. But that flows too. And night and day pass easily and lightly. Bankei continues, Buddhas in quotation mark, Buddhas of the past, present and future, and patriarchs in quotation mark of successive generations received those names after they appeared in the world. And they are thus 2 or 3 removes from the place of the unborn and of altogether minor significance. To dwell in the unborn is to dwell at the very source of the Buddhas and patriarchs. No one can know the dwelling place of the man who is firm in the conviction that each person's Buddha mind is unborn. It's not a conviction. That's a poor word to choose by either the translator or, because Bankei too, this wasn't recorded by a tape. Somebody wrote this down. It sometimes boggles my mind how all of these things could have been written down. When I find myself that never ever has anything I've said which has not been recorded properly been repeated. Not once. Oh, I'm not saying this as a personal thing. I find it very difficult myself. Impossible to really repeat verbatim what somebody said. If you listen so completely, you don't record all this stuff because you're listening. But there are such people said to have an eidetic memory, photographic memory. But one must always question scriptures which were written down and which were first passed on from mouth to mouth for hundreds of years before they were finally written down. A lot of transformation must have taken place in the course of years, hundreds of years. Particularly if the person writing it down was not a seeing person. And if he or she was, then it could be expressed in different ways. There was some understanding there. But does the reader see or just read words? When you read, how do you read? Because if one reads a newspaper, one just quickly glances over it. And there too, doesn't really, then if one talks to somebody else, one doesn't quite pass the facts on correctly when it's just skimmed over it. But in reading, let's say a paragraph from Wang Po, or just a sentence, how do you read it? Do you just read over it, the words? Or do you look and listen? Open, letting it just sink in. Maybe see if one can see what the words point to. And if this is not possible, why not? What's blocking it up? What's the blockage? Let me plumb it. Let me question it. Oh, what is it? Or just pure questioning, not knowing. Bankei continues, once you're firmly established in it, in the Buddha mind, or in this unborn, where there are no opposites, no good and bad, or this and that, you or me. Simply and without even any arduous expenditure, effort, while sitting on the tatami mats, you're living Tathagata. Well, not to talk people too much into what they are. One may find out all kinds of stuff coming up. And then one hears, well, you've seen through your koan and now you're supposed to be a living Tathagata. And there's conflict again. It starts maybe disbelieving the whole thing or change teachers or whatever. To observe what's there with this clear eye. What is important is the clear seeing, not what one sees so much, but it has to be seen or else it rules and governs one. Selfishness, self-centeredness. It's there. Is it impermeable? Or is it empty when seen with an empty mind? So it neither controls oneself nor others. Let's read it another place. It's what it's called a sermon. Bankei says, as I've been telling you, each one of you is inherently the Buddha mind. You have through habit, but having through habit and usage grown accustomed to a bad way of life, you have turned this Buddha mind into a grudging, grasping, hungry ghost existence. When you know this and fully realize it, you see it. You see there's not hungry ghost someplace in another realm. This is the hungry ghost here. Hungry for food, hungry for words, hungry for love, hungry for everything, for hunger. There's a moment of no hunger when misses being hungry. When you know this and fully realize it, not just partially, it's so, but you want to continue this way, well then you're continuing this way. Then don't complain, but see it. that you're really clutching and grasping this, and at least for the time being, want to live this way. Then do it with awareness. When you know this and fully realize it, you take on the nature of the unborn. You may say that's easily said and not easily done. And it isn't. Sounds simple, but for some reason or other it's arduous work. To face, to be in touch, to go through, to live with all this debris of the me. Bankei continues, however, if upon deciding you want to become the unborn, I decide I want to become that, you try to stop yourself from growing angry and from regretting or desiring things, then your mind becomes two. Let me read this again. However, if upon deciding you want to become the unborn or you want to become a Buddha, you try to stop yourself from growing angry, try to stop yourself from regretting or from desiring things, then your one mind becomes two. What you're now and what you want to become. That's two. Or what you're now and the controller that's going to step in and do something about this. That's also two. That has to be clearly examined. Are they two? Or is the controller the very stuff that he or she tries to control? The anger. Or the desire. The controller himself or herself is desire to control. It's all the same desire. Can this be seen and a burden drop off on one? They're just being what is. What is it? Not knowing. Questioning the knower. Questioning the desirer or the controller. Who is it? Who? When it comes up, can this desire be who? Not knowing. No goal, no aim. Yet with a yearning. One knows not really for what. Because that's another goal, another image. And yet the yearning is there. Who? Who? What is it? Or just wordless questioning. Bankei says it's like chasing after a running man. If you try to want to become something or you want to stop selfishness, that itself is me wanting now to be an unselfish me. It's absurd. What happens when you try to stop the flow of your thoughts is that the thought to stop their arising struggles against the constantly arising thoughts. And so there's no stop. So even though you may get angry in spite of yourself, or give rise to regrets or desire things, leave such thoughts alone. Leave them alone. Don't bring them along any farther. Don't hold fast to them. Or as we often say, don't give any energy to them. Have the energy gathered in the who or the moo, or the con or the questioning, or the sitting. Undivided, not at odds with this thought-producing brain, which may wonder of wonders quiet down on its own accord. Don't be concerned about stopping or not stopping thoughts. If you have nothing to do with them, they cannot fail to cease of themselves. No matter how many thoughts, different thoughts arise, let them remain right where they are. Don't give them any further attention. Don't give thought even to what you may find delightful. Don't make your mind into two. If your mind is always set like this, it won't think about what is good and what is not good. It won't think it should not think about such things, or that it should cease to think about them. And therefore thoughts of good and bad cannot help but cease naturally. The same is true of displeasure and pleasure, which are both merely bred from your self-centeredness. Such thoughts cannot fail to cease. At all events. Here, let me say this, don't make a conditional, all right, I'll try it. But something better ceases in a little while. Then there is already a condition placed, and you have already seeded frustration. Put in the seeds of frustration. You make no conditions. You have no time limit. No time limit. No time. Just giving everything the benefit of the doubt. Questioning. Not knowing. Not expecting. There's nothing to expect. Here, right here, not knowing. What is it? Right in the midst of turbulence, pain, and sorrow, without naming those either. We'll stop here for today.